Welcome back to our series on the BACB Ethics Code. There are 6 ethics code. 1. Introduction. 2. Responsibility as a professional. 3. Responsibility in practice. 4. Responsibility to clients and stakeholders. 5. Responsibility to supervisees and trainees. 6. Responsibility in public statements. 7. Responsibility in research the ethics code. In this session, we'll be diving into Section 3 Responsibility to clients and stakeholders. This section is critical because it outlines the fundamental duties and ethical obligations behavior analysts have towards their clients and the various stakeholders involved in service delivery. We'll break this down into 2 parts to ensure a thorough understanding. Today, we'll cover the first half, focusing on how we can best serve our clients while maintaining high ethical standards. Let's get started. 3.1 Responsibility to clients behavior analysts act in the best interest of clients, taking appropriate steps to support clients' rights, maximize benefits, and do no harm. They are also knowledgeable about and comply with applicable laws and regulations related to mandated reporting requirements. That means behavior analysts must always act in the best interest of their clients. This includes protecting their rights, maximizing benefits, and ensuring no harm comes to them. Analysts must also be knowledgeable about and comply with laws regarding reporting requirements. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst notices that a client is being mistreated at home. They report this to the appropriate authorities to protect the client, even if it might upset the family. Another example. When creating a behavior plan, a behavior analyst ensures that the strategies used are safe and beneficial to the client, avoiding any interventions that might cause harm. 3.2 Identifying stakeholders. Behavior analysts identify stakeholders when providing services. When multiple stakeholders, example, parent or legally authorized representative, teacher, principal, are involved, the behavior analyst identifies their relative obligations to each stakeholder. They document and communicate those obligations to stakeholders at the outset of the professional relationship. That means behavior analysts must clearly identify who the stakeholders are when providing services. They must understand their obligations to each stakeholder and communicate these clearly at the beginning of the professional relationship. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst working with a child in a school setting identifies the parents, teacher, and principal as key stakeholders. They document their obligations to each and share this with all parties at the start. Another example. When beginning services for an adult client, the behavior analyst identifies the client's legal, guardian, and support staff as stakeholders, ensuring everyone is informed about their respective roles. 3.3 Accepting clients. Behavior analysts only accept clients whose requested services are within their identified scope of competence and available resources. When directed to accept clients outside of their competence or resources, they take steps to discuss and resolve the concern with relevant parties. That means behavior analysts should only take on clients when they are confident they have the necessary skills, knowledge, and resources. If asked to accept a client outside their expertise, they must address this issue before proceeding. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst is asked to work with a client with a rare disorder they have no experience with. They discuss this with their supervisor and decide to refer the client to a more experienced professional. Another example. When offered a new case with complex behavioral challenges, the behavior analyst assesses their current workload and skills. before accepting the client to ensure they can provide effective services. 3.4 Service Agreement. Before implementing services, behavior analysts ensure that there is a signed service agreement with the client and/or relevant stakeholders, outlining the responsibilities of all parties. The scope of behavioral services to be provided, the behavior analyst obligations under the code, and procedures for submitting complaints about a behavior analyst's professional practices to relevant entities. That means behavior analysts must have a signed agreement in place before starting services. This agreement should outline the responsibilities, scope of services, and how to handle any complaints. Let's look at clinical examples. Before beginning services, a behavior analyst provides the parents with a service agreement that details what will be provided, their responsibilities, and how to address any concerns that might arise. Another example. When starting with a new client, the behavior analyst makes sure the service agreement includes information on what the client can expect from the services, as well as how to submit complaints if necessary. 3.5 Financial Agreements. Before beginning services, behavior analysts document agreed upon compensation and billing practices with their clients, relevant stakeholders, and/or funders. When funding circumstances change, they must be revisited with these parties. That means behavior analysts must clearly document and agree on payment terms before services start. If funding changes, these agreements need to be updated. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst discusses payment terms with a client's parents before starting therapy, ensuring everyone understands the fees and billing process. Another example. When a client's funding source changes, the behavior analyst revisits and updates the financial agreement with the client and stakeholders to reflect the new situation. 3.6 Consulting with other providers. Behavior analysts arrange for appropriate consultation with and referrals to other providers in the best interests of their clients, with appropriate informed consent and in compliance with applicable requirements, example, laws, regulations, contracts, organization, and funder policy. That means behavior analysts must seek advice or refer clients to other professionals when it's in the client's best interests. They should also make sure they have proper consent and follow all necessary legal and organizational guidelines. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst recognizes that a client may benefit from speech therapy. They refer the client to a speech therapist after obtaining consent from the client's legal guardian. Another example. A behavior analyst consults with a child's occupational therapist to coordinate care and ensure all aspects of the child's needs are being met, securing the necessary permissions before doing so. 3.7 Third-party contracts for services. When behavior analysts enter into a signed contract to provide services to a client at the request of a third party, example, school district, governmental entity, they clarify the nature of the relationship with each party and assess any potential conflicts before services begin. They ensure that the contract outlines 1. The responsibilities of all parties, 2. The scope of behavioral services to be provided, 3. The likely use of the information obtained, 4. The behavior analyst's obligations under the code, and 5. Any limits about maintaining confidentiality. That means behavior analysts must clearly understand and communicate the nature of the relationships when a third party is involved in service provision. They need to assess and clarify roles, responsibilities, and confidentiality limits before starting services. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst is contracted by a school to provide services to a student. Before beginning, they clarify with the school and the parents what the responsibilities of each party are and how the student's information will be used and protected. Another example. When working under a government contract, the behavior analyst ensures that all parties involved understand the scope of services and confidentiality agreements before services start. 3.8 Responsibility to the client with third-party contracts for services. Behavior analysts place the client's care and welfare above all others. If the third party requests services from the behavior analyst that are incompatible with the behavior analyst's recommendations that are outside of the behavior analyst's scope of competence, or that could result in a multiple relationship, behavior analyst resolve such conflicts in the best interest of the client. That means behavior analysts must prioritize the client's well-being, even when working under a third-party contract. If conflicts arise, they must address them with the client's best interest in mind. Let's look at clinical examples. A school requests a behavior analyst to implement an intervention that the analyst believes is not in the client's best interests. The analyst discusses this with the school and suggests an alternative approach that aligns with the client's needs. Another example. A behavior analyst is asked by a third party to provide services that are outside their scope of competence. They address the concern by either referring the case to a more qualified professional or obtaining the necessary training and consultation. 3.9 Communicating with stakeholders about third-party contracted services. When providing services at the request of a third party to a minor or individual who does not have the legal right to make personal decisions, behavior analysts ensure that the parent or legally authorized representative is informed of the rationale for and scope of services to be provided, as well as their right to receive copies of all service documentation and data. That means behavior analysts must keep parents or legal guardians fully informed when providing services requested by a third party. They must explain the services, their purpose, and the stakeholders' rights to access documentation and data. Let's look at clinical examples. A behavior analyst is providing services to a child at the request of a school district. They ensure the parents understand the services being provided and their right to access all relevant records. Another example. When providing services for an adult with a legal guardian, the behavior analyst explains the scope of services and ensures the guardian understands their rights to receive service documentation. That wraps up our first session on Section 3 Responsibility to Clients and Stakeholders in the BACB Ethics Code. I hope you found these examples helpful in understanding how to apply these principles in real-world scenarios. Make sure to join us in the next video where we'll dive into the second part of this section. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future content.